Welcome to the Better Together podcast. I'm your host, Kyla. And as you can see, we have another guest on. Cam, say hello.
Hi. So happy to be a part of this amazing programming, Kyla. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you. And as you can see, we're not in my normal setup because I'm still in Michigan in my mom's home. We're trying a little different setup than last week's episode. So before I get started, I just wanted to read my journey to the heart entry, and also I wanted to shout out my cousin Kobe, who produces and makes his own music. If you couldn't tell, the intro to the podcast was a little different, the intro song, and the outro will be different as well. So all of his music and Spotify will be linked below in the description. And if you also can't tell, my makeup might look a little different because this beautiful human is a makeup artist and did my makeup, and I will link all of her information below as well. So let's get started. This entry is called Value Your Past. Value your past and all the lessons you have learned. How easy it is to diminish the importance of our past and look on our history with a critical eye. We see the mistakes, we see what we think we should have known. We see what we could have done better. What we forget is that the reason we are able to see so clearly is because of the past and because of what we have learned. Often it is the very experiences we regret that have created this clear vision. Value what you've learned in your past. Each lesson has led to the next. Every person and event in each part of your life has been invaluable in shaping and forming you, in creating the person you are today. Each part of your past, each person who has come into your life and shared experiences with you has helped you to open up your heart more to life, love, others, and yourself. Even those experiences you think of as wrong or mistakes have been an important and necessary part in creating you. Sometimes those experiences form the most important parts of you because they created in you compassion and understanding for others. Often the most painful events of your life are the ones that opened you to the ability to bring healing, help, and hope to others. Your past taught you to love others and yourself. It has helped you become a channel for divine love and force for good in this world. When you look back at your past, look tenderly and gently at all you have been through. Look with the eyes of the soul. See that each experience was necessary to bring you home to your heart. So I chose that entry today because we are going to be talking about a pretty serious topic, which is parents who have struggled with substance use and addiction and the loss of those parents. So to get started, I think the best way to go about this is for you to start off by sharing a little bit of your story.
Sure.
And then I'll start off and share my story, and then we'll get into it.
Yes, that's great. I think that was a really nice entry, and it really does hit home, like your trauma and the things that you go through in life, like they affect who you are, and you have the choice to make the best of it or make the worst of it. And I think you and I have both made the best of our situations, and that has really led us to having not only a great friendship, but having the ability to share our stories. So I'm gonna get into a little bit of my story. It is a sad but happy story with a great ending. And I'll try to keep it concise so we can really get down to all the wonderful topics and sections of our itinerary today.
Yes, but take your time with it.
Thank you. So my life started out with a father who got full custody of me when I was just out of the hospital. I was born 2 months premature, and I was in incubation for a very long time. The reason for that is I was being weaned off opium for the beginning months of my life. With that being said, I had a great father who took me and made me his own. He was a single dad, and he was an amazing, amazing, amazing dad. And so he took custody of me. We lived in a home together. He was a great father. And when I was 1, another, I'm like, I feel like I'm not being organized with my thoughts, but it's just so much to defold that it's hard.
Yeah.
And
no, that's
I was
totally
telling
fine.
Kyla before, like, I don't really talk about this often. So having the opportunity to talk about it, like, and being recorded is like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary opening up about this.
It's scary, but it's really important. So anyway, let me try to gather my thoughts a little bit. So while I was being taken care of by my dad, he met an amazing person that became a huge role in my life, which is the hero of my story, which I'm going to get to later on. But basically, I had this mother who never got custody of me. My dad took me in, took great care of me. And as I got older, we did small things like supervised visitations and like small visits, and just kind of like slowly introducing me to her and kind of finding that rhythm of like, are we going to have a relationship? Are we not? And it's confusing because, you know, you're a young person, you have your dad who's your rock, and usually in like a normal situation of growing up, you have a mom and a dad, or in a lot of cases, you have a mom and sometimes maybe not a dad. And it just, you're always used to having that mother figure. And that's what I saw in like a lot of my friends and a lot of like, you know, books and stories as a young person growing up. So I grew up and I didn't really have that person that I knew as my mom or that I was told was my mom, but I had another amazing woman that my dad had met and started dating and was always there for me. And we grew up and my life became more normal. I had a dad, a mother figure, and this person who was my mom from birth that I didn't really know of and, you know, wasn't sure about. She was there, but not really. So it's confusing. It's hard. So then let's fast forward to middle school, high school. We started doing supervised visitations a little bit more often. She wanted to see me. And, you know, I already had this good home unit of my dad and my new mom, who my dad married. And it became even more confusing as like a young adult that, okay, like I have this good family dynamic going, but I have this other person. And as I got a little bit older, I think it was around 10, my dad ended up passing away. And that was a whole nother heartbreak and trauma that is so unexplainable to someone that hasn't been through it. Because, you know, my dad was my rock. He was my everything. He was my mom. He was my dad. And luckily, I got so lucky that he found this amazing partner to marry and be my mom, a great mother figure that led me through everything. And like, I truly don't know where I would be or what I would do without her taking that role on and, you know, being that person for me. So once my dad passed, things got a little bit more sticky with my birth mom, and then now I have my mom who has raised me. And it just became like even more complicated because during high school, my birth mom wanted to do things and spend time with me, and she's like, well, your dad's gone now. Shouldn't I be the one like stepping in and taking that role? But I didn't really get into all the highs and lows of my mom's story. That's a whole nother podcast episode. But in my experience, when you have a parent struggling with addiction, you can't really count on what they're saying to be true or authentic, or if they're going to show up, if they're not going to show up.
Can't rely on them.
Yeah, you can't rely on them. So that was a whole nother layer of, like, she wants to be this person in my life, but she doesn't have the ability to do so because her addiction was her priority. And it took me a really long time to like understand that, because as a young person, you're like, this is supposed to be like my mom, like the person that gave birth to me. Like, why can't they like get their shit together and just like be there?
Right.
Like it's just, I can't comprehend that. So it was a lot of that during high school of like, okay, like I talked to my mom and she said she's going to do better and it's going to all be fine. Like it's going to be fine. And then the next month, maybe I hear, oh, your mom, she is in jail because she was driving under the influence of, her vice was heroin. And on the topic of being a high school girl in the area that we grew up in, like you don't talk about that. You don't, it's embarrassing. You don't know how to communicate to your friends you're going through that. And lucky for me, I had this mother figure that wasn't my mom, but was my mom. And it's like I was able to hide what I was going through. And I didn't have to talk about it. No one had to know. And of course, like my close friends knew, but like it's embarrassing and it's isolating. And, you don't want that to be your reality. You don't want that to be your identifier.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how it played out in high school. And then fast forward after high school, I get a phone call. It was actually on the first night of Passover, I want to say. And my mom, not my mom of, it's confusing, but my mom, not of birth.
Yes.
My stepmom, we'll call her, even though I don't like to use that terminology.
Yeah.
She said, you need to come home right now. I have some news and I don't want to tell you over the phone. And I couldn't figure out what it could possibly be. Obviously, when your mom calls you with something like that, you're like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. Like, what is happening? But no, I get home. She tells me, your mom, your birth mom, overdosed. And at that point, it's like, it's unfortunate, but it's like there was almost this sense of like relief for me when I heard that, because it just, you never knew, like I said, like the reliability, like we kind of had like a falling out after like I got to the age where I'm like, okay, like I can't count on this person. I can't be in this constant state of like the unknown. Like she's going to be there for me. She's not going to be there for me.
Yeah.
So we had like a little bit of a distance where I stopped responding to her calls and her texts. And, so it kind of was a sense of relief for me that I didn't have to deal with that anymore. But then the other side of me is like, oh my God, like I never had any closure. Like, am I like the bad person that like didn't give her the opportunity to, speak her truth and like be able to like,
I think there's a lot of survivor's guilt in situations like this. And I think in my situation, our situations are very different, but there are very similar things. And I can kind of go into my story if you're ready.
Yes, I would love that.
So for me, it was a little bit different because I did have a very like normal nuclear family growing up. When I was very young, my parents got divorced when I was 4. So that was a little bit different, but honestly, very normal in these times. But my dad was someone who struggled on and off throughout his entire life, not his entire life, but his entire adult life with addiction and with mental health issues. And when I was little, I remember him being such a great father. He was so good with us when we were little. But as we got older, and I should preface, I didn't really understand his addiction issues whatsoever. I didn't look at him like that. I didn't think that he had any problems. He was a very successful anesthesiologist and did well for himself. So that's how I always saw him. I saw him as this like superhero figure. And it wasn't until I was older where problems started to arise with his anger. He would get very angry at situations that didn't feel like they were small situations, and he became scary to me. So at a certain point, I think it was my freshman year of high school, I made a huge decision and decided to move in with my mom full time. And when I did that, it was a sort of situation where I had to run away in a way. It wasn't like I did tell him, I said I was going to spend the week with my mom and just see how that felt because I didn't want to switch houses because that's what we did. We split 50-50. I would just get so much anxiety from going to his house because of his anger issues. And it was scary. And also, like, I totally relate to your story. This is not something I ever talked about in school. Nobody ever knew what was going on. It was very independent to my home life. And I feel like school actually was a very safe place for me to go to and escape from all this, as well as being at my mom's house. So anyways, fast forward, in high school, I tell my dad I'm going to spend the week with my mom. I don't feel like doing the switch over, and I just want to see what that feels like, not having to pack a bag and bring it to school and switch houses. And he got upset by that. And so after school that day, I stopped responding to his calls, his messages, and I went immediately to my mom's work, where she was working at the time, at her office, because I was so scared that I did not want anybody to know where I was so they could come get me and bring me to my dad's house. That's how scared I was.
It's so interesting because I find that to be sort of a common theme with like people that I've spoke to that have parents with addiction. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of those fears too. And like when I was saying about my mom and I like had that distance of like, I kind of cut ties. I like needed to separate myself because I couldn't deal with that. There was one situation where I was at work and I was pulling into work and she pulled her car in really fast and almost like barricaded me in to try to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And like, it's scary. Like people that are going through addiction, like their emotions are so irregular that you just don't know what version of them you're going to get, which is scary as any person, but especially a young person, and seeing your parent or an adult figure act in that way, like it's very traumatizing for a young person.
Yeah. And I also felt like at this time, I don't know even if he was using, because it was an on and off thing. He spent time in rehab when I was very little and was doing well, but this anger thing was something that was like a through line throughout my life with him. And so it was very scary, but I ended up, moving in with my mom. I didn't talk to my dad for a long time after that, and I didn't go back to that house for a long time. I literally left everything I had there and did not go back. And it was the most freeing experience for me because I felt safe and I didn't have all that anxiety. And as a young person, whatever household you're in, that reality is your normal reality.
Yeah, it's like your whole existence, and like safety and feeling safe as a young person, as any person, is huge.
Yes.
It's all we have.
Exactly. And I truly believe that everybody's dad was like that. I truly believe that everybody's household was similar to what I was growing up in. Mm-hmm. But fast forward, in my later high school years and yeah, mostly my later high school years, and right after high school, my dad started struggling a lot with addiction and getting back into drugs and not doing well. And I was aware of this, but I was in a lot of denial about it. And so I didn't see it as this, I didn't think it was going to be something that was going to be a major problem. And I don't know really how to explain that unless you're really in the situation. But in 2015, he ended up passing away from a drug overdose. And at that time, we were trying to mend our relationship. So it was similar where I felt like there was a lot of unresolved
Yeah.
issues that felt like we still needed to talk about, but didn't get the chance to really do that. And I also want to say that I do not think illy, how do you say that? I don't think badly of my dad whatsoever. I loved him. I love him still, even during those moments of anger. Like, I still think that he was a really good person. So I want to preface that and say that even though I say that I was afraid of him and I had a lot of anxiety surrounding him, that doesn't mean he was a bad person. That doesn't mean that he just period, doesn't mean he was a bad person.
Right.
And I still loved him.
And it's interesting being the older versions of ourselves now and kind of like looking back on what we went through and like why our parents were the way that they were. And it just really goes to show, like, if you're not working on yourself and like your issues like at a deeper level, it can turn into something like that. And like, it's just really important to like realize that if you're struggling with something, like, even for example, like, I'm trying to think, like eating, you know, like eating is so fun for me. Like, I love eating. Like, it's my passion.
Great.
It is great. And I find that like sometimes like I go a little overboard and I try to like compare that to maybe like what my mom went through with drugs, even though it's apples to, it's not comparable. But it really is, you have to think about it like it's a disease.
Yeah.
And it's hard to control like what you go through when you're struggling with addiction. So I've come to try to like take a step back and see that like it wasn't personal towards us. Like, your dad never wanted to be aggressive or scary to you.
Yeah.
My mom never wanted to not be there for me and not be able to be a person in my life. But it's like when an addiction is so strong, a disease is so strong, they can't help that.
Yeah. And I think after my dad died, that's when I started to really look at what addiction does. And I really started to like learn about it and substance use and like root causes of it. And what I ended up learning, I actually made a whole film about this in grad
amazing.
school.
Yeah.
And I ended up talking to my family for the first time about his issues and what it was like, my aunts, what it was like growing up with him, and my grandma, what it was like, her going through these experiences as well, and just learning more about him. Because I think when you're younger, you look at your parents as
your parents,
yeah.
just your parents. They're not people, they're just your parents.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
They're these perfect superhumans.
Yeah.
And as you grow up, you realize that this is their first time living
right.
life.
That's like such an amazing quote. Like, this is their first time doing life too.
Yeah. And you realize too, as you get older, you think that, oh, by this age, I'm going to have everything figured out. By this age, I'm going to have everything figured out. Well, let me tell you, I am 28 years old. I am closer to 30 now, and I do not have everything figured out. And that's okay. And we're all living for the first time, and it's okay to experience those things.
Yeah.
But what I learned after talking to my family and researching about addiction, I learned that my dad struggled with a lot of anxiety growing up. He was more of a type A personality, which is exactly who I am. And he struggled with depression and had mental health issues. And he was very strict about what he wanted to do with his life and be a doctor, and that was very hard and strenuous. And I think to cope with a lot of his issues, and on top of that, he had arthritis, so he struggled with
Was in pain, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think to cope with a lot of that stuff, he started taking drugs and medication to help minimize his pain and anxiety,
Yeah.
and that became
Right.
to an addiction.
And that's like, I see a lot of people that, lean towards a pain pill and it turns into something totally different. Like, no one intends to become addicted to drugs. And that's something that I think I couldn't comprehend. Like, when I was super young, I always would say, like, at least in my head, I don't know if I vocalized this, but like, yeah, like my mom picked heroin over me.
Yeah.
But like, you can't think like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much more to the story.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stigma around people who use, and that's the idea. And I always thought that way too.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my dad chose drugs over being there for me. And the reality of it is that's not true. Our parents both struggled mentally and used, and it is a disease in your brain, and it's not something that you can just cold turkey stop one day. It's actually very dangerous to cold turkey stop. You can die from that. So it takes a lot of work to maintain it, because once you are addicted or have a substance use, I want to use the right terms, because I know there's different terms you can use now that are more respectful, but this disease of addiction is something, once you have it, it doesn't go away. It's something you have to work towards your entire life to maintain, to not use, and to stay clean. So
no, I think it's huge, and it's like another thing that I know we kind of touched on already is that they went through their own trauma and their own issues. Like, your dad was suffering from pain from arthritis and having anxieties and all these different things that accumulate to turning into you needing that crutch, and then it becomes a dependence, and it trickles down the tree and then becomes our trauma. And I'm just really, really proud of us for being the kind of young women to have emotional maturity to like understand that maybe we didn't when we were younger. That it's not about us.
We have more compassion towards them. And there was something I was saying to you prior to recording. What was it? That we don't allow our past traumas to define what our future looks like.
Exactly. And like, you cannot. I know so many people that have a hard upbringing or go through something, and that's it. Like, that's what's defining them. Like, we're not going to let ourselves get to the next level of life because this happened to us. But it is so important to just keep pushing on, no matter what you go through or the things that happen to you. They can't define you.
Yeah. And I also think that something else we were talking about is it can be very hard to share these intimate parts of our lives.
Yeah, it's scary.
And traumas, in front of
you guys
camera.
are probably the first to hear about this.
Yeah. And so it's very scary to share this, but I also want to say that this is what this podcast is about. It's about creating a safe space and a comfort for people who deal with all sorts of different traumas. And we're opening up today about this because we feel like it's important to share vulnerability in order to connect with the people around us.
And to grow. In order to grow to like your best potential, you need to like lift that weight off yourself and discuss things that are hard. Like, not everything can be so sunshine and butterflies. Like this stuff, this is what makes us strong. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like in the last episode, it was the grief episode, so you guys have heard all about dealing with
loss and all of that and the struggle of that. But I think that these past experiences have, I say they don't shape our future, but they
hold weight.
They hold weight. They've taught us things, and they taught us what we don't want and what we want.
Right. I mean, I will say a lot of my discipline, not that I ever really have been super into like drinking or drugs, but you know, there's always that little like devil on my shoulder being like, just be careful, like don't take anything too far. Like, of course, like, you know, you go out, you have a drink, and like that's all fun and games, but it's like you have to be so cautious when addiction runs in your family that you don't let it escalate to the point of no return. Because it can be that way for a lot of people. And it's very subtle and easy to fall into that. You have a bad week, you have a drink or two or three. Exactly. You're anxious, you take your prescription Xanax, which your doctor prescribed to you, and like you think that's fine, which, you know, it's all about just being really in tune with yourself and your goals and who you are as a person, and not allowing yourself to slip into something you don't want to become. And I think seeing my mom, my birth mom, in the way of the person that I didn't ever want to become has been really detrimental to my character. Can you explain that a little bit? Yeah. I think just in the sense of, you know, my mom was a very kind of dirty being. Like, she came from a very well-off, like, start of life, but she just, the way she presented herself was very, like, grungy and dirty. She didn't take care of herself because she was maybe high on drugs or, you know, just, like, the way she presented herself, the way she acted. There was times where she would be caught stealing from a local store, or, you know, going into a bathroom and like getting high and passing out. And just like, you know, we live in a very tight-knit community, and people talk, and it would get back to me, and I would just be so mortified that like that is how she was portrayed and how she was acting. And it was heartbreaking for me, because on one hand, I'm so embarrassed. I don't want to be associated with her in any way. Like, I'm like, how could that be like someone that I came from? And on the other hand, it's like, I remember like I would like see like how like messy and dirty like her nails and stuff were, and like her home was so like it was a beautiful home, but nothing was taken care of because that wasn't the priority. So I have made it like such a point, like I never want to be like that. I want to take care of myself and my things, and, you know, have good relationships with people, and always be someone that like a friend can rely on. If I say I'm going to be somewhere or do something, I always am, because I've been in a position where, you know, I've seen someone that acts in a way that is unreliable. So as much as I've seen her at her worst and be that version of herself, I think it was a huge part of making me the best version of myself. And you are a rock star. Like, I mean, and I think it comes from trauma. It does. It truly. Shout out childhood trauma. Hell yeah. Loving it. Loving it. I also wanted to hit on the point of, we live in a society where no one wants to, nobody wants to experience pain, but we live in a society where we're told that we don't need to experience pain and feelings and all of this stuff. And that's why there's all these, you know, pills and such. And anxiety drugs and alcohol and weed and, you know, vices. And I try to remind myself, and I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I don't. Perfect. I try. And I'm not saying that like I don't, you know, participate in social drinking and, you know, whatever else, but I do want to
I try to remind myself constantly that when I am not feeling good, or I am feeling really anxious, or just feeling generally sad or going through something, that I don't need something to take that away. I just need to be able to be strong enough to sit through it and allow myself to have those emotions, because that's how you get through it. You don't get through it by covering it up. And
Right. That's so true. Because so many people, like, exactly, there's so many vices and so many things to, like, take the edge off or distract yourself or scroll on your phone. But to sit in pain and sit in, like, what feels like the end of the world, I
Yeah.
think is really important for growth and just, like, mind development and just, like I said, getting to that next level of life.
yeah. And I said this in the last episode, or my mom said it, I cannot recall, but be allow yourself to talk to the people around you that you trust the most and your community, and be able to open up about things, because it makes it a lot easier when you don't isolate and you allow your community of people to help you. And it's okay to need help. Everybody needs help sometimes. All right. Well, from here, I'm going to wrap things up. I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your
Oh my
story.
God, this was so fun. And like I feel like lighter leaving this conversation because,
Yeah.
you know, it's so nice to have someone that can relate to you, because there is not many people that I feel comfortable, you know, talking to about this, because, you know, if you don't get it, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And when you get it, you get it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I also think it's interesting. I don't think we knew very much about me.
No, we've known. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell the viewers.
Cam and I have known each other since we were probably 7 or 8 years
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
We
Tell them our similarity. That will be funny.
Oh yeah.
I like that.
We connected. We were at a family friend's house that we both know, having a sleepover. I think it was a birthday party or something, and we bonded over that we used to pee in the bed.
Yeah, we had really bad wedding issues, probably
Yeah,
from all of our childhood trauma.
Yeah, exactly. So we decided that night we were going to share a bed together, and
We
that way
became fast friends.
Yeah.
And we've known each other since, and we've stayed connected since. And
Yep.
But it is funny, like I think we both like are just so used to not sharing about like the addiction side of our lives that
Yeah.
like we just, you know, we've been talking sunshine and butterflies for the past 20 years.
Right. No, I only started opening up about this after my dad passed away, because that's when I truly understood things.
Right.
But
Yeah, and I feel like as you grow, like it all kind of like makes more sense versus like when we were younger, like nothing made sense.
yeah, and we didn't know how to like comprehend or have.
Yeah, I had no
yeah.
emotional capacity, and now I'm
Yeah.
like literally like everything makes me cry now,
I know.
but in a fun way.
Yeah, it's good. You should let yourself
It's
cry.
good. You have to cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's wrap this up. Please remember to rate, like, comment, and
Ooh.
subscribe. I will link below all of Cam's makeup
Yes,
information.
and if you live in Michigan, I do amazing work. I also do brow shaping at homes. I am on the road, so I come to people's homes. I have a mobile beauty business. So please follow me at Cam Glam, Cams with 2 M's _GLAM. And I'd love to connect to any Michigan viewers.
Yes, please connect. And I'm going to link all of her information below. I'm also going to link helpful, links and tools about drug use and addiction and how to handle that stuff. I'll also link my film if anybody's interested in watching that. And please remember to follow me on my personal Instagram, which is Kyla_Millberger. Follow me on the podcast Instagram, which is the_bettertogether_podcast. And please write in your questions, comments, stories to thebettertogetherpod@gmail.com. And as I always say, please feel free to reach out. I am open to listen and be there for a support for anybody who is struggling with whatever is going on in your lives. And that is that. So thank you once again for tuning in, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.